Good morning, everybody. Today we are talking about electronics on motorcycles. I have a lot to say about this topic, to be honest. I want to walk you guys through today what kind of new electronics are on bikes, why we may or may not need them, and everything I kind of know about them. So today we're going to discuss the kind of pros and cons of electronics on bikes. Bikes are getting more and more complicated every year. Thankfully, some manufacturers are still selling very simple bare bones bikes. I'm thinking, Kawasaki makes some great entry-level options that are simple, Royal Enfield for sure. But today's motorcycle that I'm on is this Triumph Tiger 1200 Rally Pro. I have this motorcycle as a long-term demo from Eurocycle, so be sure to check them out down below in the descriptions because they are our preferred dealership. They ship all over the nation, and we do love them. We have some really cool plans with this bike, actually, later on in this year, and I cannot reveal just yet what we are cooking up, but that's something very special. And the reason I wanted to talk about it today, I'm on my way up to Yamanoob HQ. Also, this is not my neighborhood, so don't come to these random people's houses. I don't live here. I'm going up to Yamanoob HQ, and the Triumph is doing a bunch of super weird electronics-related stuff. Shocker, I know. Triumph and electronic issues. Who would have thought, right? But let's swing a leg over this machine, and we will go take it on a nice commute to the shop and talk about electronics. Let's go, shall we? So first of all, keyless ignition. That's something I'm seeing more and more on motorcycles. And to be honest, I don't really see the benefit of keyless ignition. Let's see if this thing will want to get started here. Nice. It wasn't doing that this morning, I'll tell you that. You're going to see a bunch of weird stuff happening with this bike. I don't know what's going on with it, but it's not healthy or well. So, keyless ignition is the first one I wanted to talk about. Oh my God. Okay, I really don't get the purpose. Like, in cars it's cool because you can keep it in your pocket, you press the button, it turns it on. But on a motorcycle, I feel like half the time I'm gonna lose where my keys are, and there's no spot to put the key on the bike anymore, man. It just added a layer of complexity that wasn't really necessary. So that's my first gripe I wanted to talk about today as we took off with the Triumph. But kind of looking over electronics, what is the purpose of electronics on a motorcycle? Well, really, they're designed for safety and comfort. Those are the two categories that I can think of when it comes to electronics. Now, on race machines like an R1 or an S1000RR, they're designed to elicit faster lap times, and some of that technology can actually help. You see, it's already doing some of the craziness. Some of that technology can help you stay safer on the street, but it came derived from the racetrack. So, thinking over stuff that's designed to keep you safer and get you better lap times is something like traction control. And traction control is a really awesome thing to have on a motorcycle. And I've kind of come around on this, to be honest. I used to think that I was like, on lower power machines, like an RS660 that has 100 horsepower, which a lot of you might say isn't a low power machine, but, or an MT-07, something with 75-ish horsepower. I was kind of like, oh, well, what's the point of having traction control? Because really, you can manage all of that with this. But, in wet weather conditions, slippery surfaces, it is nice to have a system there that is kind of helping to save your bacon in case you have an issue. It's not often that people have issues when they're riding in the wet and stuff like that, but it's nice to have a system that's there to kind of smooth things over for you a little bit. And again, it's really cool because TC came from the need for racers to go faster and to manage and manicure a lot of their power. And that's a system that you can now benefit from on the street. Now, another thing that's really cool is obviously ABS, right? ABS was kind of the first real kind of digitalization of the riding experience outside of, fuel injection, that sort of thing. But having ABS on a motorcycle was something that a lot of people, when it came out, back in the 80s and stuff, I've read articles, I obviously wasn't alive back then, but whenever it first came out, a lot of people still share this opinion that it's like, oh, why do I need ABS? I'm a fantastic rider. I can get away with, riding my bike and using ABS when I need to. Let's lop over a speed bump there. And that's, look at this bike. What is it doing? It's currently dying on me. That's what it's doing. I have to pull over. This is, yeah. It's hilarious. Come on, baby. There we go. Yeah, this motorcycle is having some sort of electronics issues, specifically electrics issue. I think the reg rec is having some issues, which is hilarious because it's a brand new motorcycle. But that leads me to my other point, is that electronics on bikes can lead to a lot of faults. You know, it can lead to a lot of problems. You're adding much more complexity into the system, and whenever you do that, you get a bike that has more failure points, you know, and whether you like it or not, motorcycles that have more failure points, you know, they're going to be harder to take care of. You know, a lot of this stuff you can't even service anymore. Like whatever's happening with this Triumph, I'm just going to take it straight to the dealership. I wouldn't want to, you know, try my hand at fixing whatever the issue is, because number one, it's got to go into a diagnostics port. Number two, it's probably some software related issue, if I were to guess. And so the more and more complicated the bikes become, the harder and harder it is to service them and to keep them on the road. You know, something like a Royal Enfield, you know, love it or hate it, that's a bike that, I mean, you probably will be able to keep that thing on the road yourself for decades. Whereas this Triumph has a much shorter lifespan on the road. And it's interesting how motorcycles are starting to reflect the kind of consumer market. You know, phones are like this now. They're highly disposable objects. They're things that people are willing to just toss out of the window after 2 or 3 years. They're like, oh yeah, I don't need to keep this. I don't need to, you know, keep this phone going. Much like people are like, oh, I don't need to keep this motorcycle going. I'll just get another one whenever it comes out. And that's kind of a problem in my opinion. And also that intersects with stuff like right to repair, right? Where all of a sudden you have a motorcycle that you may not be able to fix because it breaks the warranty if you even crack open the seat cover and take a look at the battery, you know? So that's definitely a big downside of the electronics in motorcycles nowadays as well. So again, electronics on a motorcycle are designed for safety and comfort, but it's weird because motorcycles aren't really about safety or comfort anyways, right? Like these are bikes that, you know, you're obviously more danger when you're riding a motorcycle, and the comfort factor, like yes, you can make a bike more comfortable, but ultimately, you know, a motorcycle is not really the most comfortable form of transport. Like this bike that I'm on right now, this Tiger 1200 Rally, is one of the most comfortable bikes that you could get, really. And even that, you know, you're still subjected to the elements, you're still on a motorcycle, you're not going to be able to keep it super comfortable. But it's cool that manufacturers are trying to design in some more comfort and safety features. One feature that I love, for example, is cruise control. I actually have really come to appreciate and enjoy cruise control. I think it's a fantastic feature on motorcycles, and especially long distance touring bikes like this. You know, if you're just going to be slabbing for hours on the highway, that's pretty nice to just be able to, you know, check out a little bit on the right hand and just give your right hand a little break and kind of take it easy. That's a really cool feature. Whereas I think that, you know, the electronic throttles can be a little twitchy. They're not as direct as the cable actuated throttles. The benefits, I think, outweigh the cons when it comes to that. And you know, the systems kind of beget systems, right? Once you start adding one layer of systems on the bike, you have to add more and more layers for it to all work together, right? You know, you get a computer controlled throttle as opposed to a cable throttle, and all of a sudden you have to, you know, have more features around that. You need to have the TC related to that, and you need to have the cruise control related to that. All of it starts to come together in that way. That's a really important thing when it comes to electronics on the bike, is they're all interrelated, right? Like if you add a quick shifter up, that's a pretty easy feature. You don't need too much whiz-bangery to do a quick shifter up on a bike. However, if you want to have an auto blip down, well, all of a sudden you will need to have the computer-controlled throttle and more sophisticated electronics. If you want super simple traction control, you can have that without having to have a 6-axis IMU, but once you want cornering ABS or maybe lean-sensitive traction control, then it starts getting a lot more complicated. And the thing about it is, once you have that extra complication in the system, you start getting motorcycles that feel a little bit numb. They feel a little not so fun to ride anymore. You know, like this Triumph Tiger 1200, like as cool as it is, and it is very cool, I still find it kind of a bit of a, you know, not a soulless experience necessarily, but it kind of gets there, honestly. And to be honest, all the tech and features, they start to detract from the riding experience, in my opinion. You start getting a motorcycle that feels a little numb, you know? And that's one of the big downsides for me with a motorcycle that has a lot of these electronic features, is they just end up feeling a little bit numb, a little bit cold, and nobody really wants that, you know? Oh, what a beautiful morning it is here in Austin. It's never a bad day when you're on a bike. Off camber, tight little corner. All the beautiful hills here. It's a great morning. Related to that too, once you have all these systems that you can turn on and off and do that sort of thing, then you will need some sort of screen to operate all the systems, right? It's impossible to have, you know, all these traction control and wheelie control and slide control systems without having the ability to go in and dial it in and out as you so choose. So then you have to have a big screen on the bike. You can't have just a simple little, you know, rev counter and a speedometer, because the whole bike in and of itself is more complicated. I think one feature that, you know, a lot of people think that they need, but really they don't need at all, is electronic suspension. If I'm being completely honest, like, yes, it feels absolutely Gucci to have electronic suspension, but it is the type of thing where if I didn't have a bike, if I had a bike without it, I really wouldn't miss it at all, to be honest. It wouldn't be anything to where I'd be like, oh, I really miss having my electronic suspension. You know, I can't do X, Y, and Z without it. Having mechanical clickers is totally fine. Really not a big deal at all to have that. And that's definitely one that I think most people can live without. And the other thing that we're not talking about either is when you have all of these electronics, the cost goes up on these bikes too. I mean, one of the reasons Royal Enfield can stay so freaking cost effective is the fact that the bikes are just simple. You know, it's why they can sell you a bike for a little over $5,000, because what really is there on the bike, you know? Whereas, you know, you have this kind of arms race right now in the top end categories where bikes are pretty often now over $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. You're seeing a market move very quickly upwards in price, you know? And it's why I don't understand why manufacturers haven't caught on to the fact that having cheap bikes is how you're going to win in today's market. You know, I put out the ZX4 video the other day, and the biggest takeaway I got from it, and the biggest takeaway I had from it was, you know, this is a nearly $10,000 400cc motorcycle. And yes, it's an inline 4, it has a different frame, it's got some tech and stuff, but why can't we have a version that is stripped down, doesn't have all the tech, doesn't have all the craziness, and then you can sell it for much cheaper? Because if manufacturers were kind of listening to the groundswell, kind of like I am, I'm in a position where I get to hear what a lot of people say on the internet. Basically, people are clamoring for cheaper bikes. You know, they're clamoring for bikes that are cost effective. I think if Kawasaki had made the ZX4 and made it $79.99 somehow, I know they probably don't have margin to do that on that particular platform, but the people want cheap, good, new motorcycles, you know? Like, that's why Royal Enfield is winning like crazy, because they make decent, cheap bikes, and that's all people really want. That's why the electric market still isn't there, in my opinion, because, you know, as much as you want to be an early adopter, and me, for example, I love motorcycling. I have so many motorcycles, and it's one of my greatest joys in life. I am not prepared to go and spend $25,000 on a glorified Tesla electric motorcycle type of thing just because I want to be an early. It's too much money. It's too much money for a toy. I personally, on my own personal bikes, other than the H2 and the Turbo Busa, which are different sort of things, I've never spent more than about $11,000 for a bike. And I think a lot of people are in a similar position. They don't want to drop untold amounts of money on a bike. They just want something good, cheap, fun, and reliable. And electronics are kind of hampering the way. And again, it's a bit of an arms race now where you know, all these manufacturers are chasing this kind of new kind of parallel twin with an up-down quick shifter, TFT screen, you know, all that good stuff. And here's the thing too, honestly, all this tech will get cheaper over time. I mean, that's kind of the way it works, right? Like, you know, the first iPhone, inflation adjusted, is a similar price to the ones we have now, I believe, and the ones we have now are way better. It's a similar story with cars, right? Like, I think in 1991, a Porsche 911, inflation adjusted, was about $120,000 for a base model. And now today the base model is a little over 100 grand, which is, you know, makes me want to throw up in my mouth that someone would spend 6 figures on a base model car, but it's Porsche, whatever. But you're getting a car with a lot more features than that base model from 1991, right? That model didn't have all the cool stuff that this one has that keeps you safe, with lane keep assist and all kinds of doodads and everything else, and cameras and all that stuff. You know, you're seeing some really interesting tech starting to pop up in motorcycles, like radar assisted cruise control. I wouldn't be surprised if in the future there's a camera option on the TFT screen where you can simply flick a switch and see behind you on the TFT and then flick it back. I have that feature in my truck, for example. I can activate the rear-facing camera and take a look behind me whenever I want. I don't see why that wouldn't be the case in motorcycles. And the really interesting thing is, too, bikes in the top-end category, leader bikes, R1, S1000 RR, you know, Panigale V4S, power is no longer really the problem. We can make a ton of horsepower, as the Panigale V4R has proven. You can sell a motorcycle shipped with a factory warranty that has over 230 horsepower. Absolutely crazy. But the issue is, the riders are obviously not skilled enough to take advantage of all that power. You know, the motorcyclists nowadays, they're not in a position to take advantage of 230. When are you going to use 230 horsepower on track or on street at anywhere close to its effectiveness, you know, at the limit? You're not. You're just simply not. And so the next kind of wave of electronics has been just manicuring these bikes, man, just making sure that, you know, you have a motorcycle that makes all that power and yet is somehow still rideable. That's the great trick that something like the Street Fighter V4S plays, is that it's a motorcycle that, you know, comes with a ridiculous amount of power, and yet it doesn't feel that scary or crazy to use. You know, it's a bike that feels like you can actually daily it, which, you know, 10 years ago, you would say a naked bike with 207 horsepower, that's completely unusable. But it's not. It's actually usable because of the electronics. Oh, look at this bike, dude. That was not me stalling it. That was, I swear, I was already rolling. I couldn't have stalled it. Oh my God, this Triumph. It just keeps flashing this battery issue on me. Triumph and electronic problems. Wouldn't you guess it? So I really think it's one of those things where it's not all good, it's not all bad, right? When it comes to electronics and motorcycling, we're getting some really cool stuff added to bikes, and I think it makes sense for the categories that they're in. Like this motorcycle, big adventure touring thing. Yes, throw every single doodad and frickin' farkle at this thing, because the people who buy this bike want that. But, you know, don't Tiger, here's the thing, don't full-size ADV my entry-level naked bike. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't turn an honest motorcycle into a bit of a silly thing by throwing everything in the kitchen sink of electronics at it, because it doesn't really add much to the experience. And I think that's why Kawasaki should have made a base ZX4. Don't give me just the ZX4 RR with all the crazy stuff on it. Give me something that's going to really be fun to ride, but that doesn't have all the nannies on it. You know, I don't need all the nannies. I don't want all the nannies. But then, you know, if you're riding a big bike like this, you do want all the nannies, and it could be the type of thing where you can have the best of both worlds. And that's why I think the most important thing with these electronics is we need to have the kind of bandwidth and the right to fix them and change them as we see fit, which right now we definitely don't. And then we also need the ability to romp on it a little bit. Bike's gonna die on me if I keep doing that, because it did it earlier when I was riding it. I can't get it up near red line because it'll die. So we need the right to fix them, and we need the ability to completely switch off all the electronics, which more and more, it's like you can't fully turn them off. You know, I've noticed this in cars, and I've noticed this in bikes now, where like, yes, it says you can turn off all the systems and stuff, but at the end of the day, it still feels like you can't really turn them all off. But I want to reiterate, most riders benefit from these systems. Most riders are not so capable, and even though they think they are, to take advantage of all of the systems that a bike has. You got to really be a A-grade rider to take an R1 and turn off all the nannies and ride it faster than you would with the nannies on. The S1000RR, the brand new one, you know, a lot of reviewers are basically saying that, you know, with the new electronics, people are faster on track with them, and they feel better to ride, and they're easier to ride, and it's more fun to ride because of that, because it makes you feel like a superhero instead of feeling like you're really wrestling the thing. And you know, some riders like myself, I really enjoy that. I took the 1098 out on track in 2021. Absolutely analog, visceral, 102 foot-pounds of torque, animal of a motorcycle, and it doesn't feel like, you know, it's gonna really bite your head off, because if you're a good rider, you can manicure that power and really make use of it and feel good about it. But that's not everybody, you know, that's definitely not everybody. So guys, what do you think? Let me know down below about technology and motorcycling. This was kind of my first foray into doing this Yam commute vlog. I'm getting ready to head up to the shop here in just a moment, but would love your feedback on this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. And we'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.
I'm impressed. I think the only thing I can do is just keep watching Yammy Noob.